Colleagues, Anthony McKay, President and CEO of the National Centre on Education and the Economy, based in Washington, DC. And I'm absolutely delighted that I'm being joined by Kirsten Dunlop. Kirsten, welcome.
Hello, Anthony. Lovely to be with you this morning.
Well, we are here because you are a special guest of the UNESCO Futures Literacy Summit, and we're about to have a conversation. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And let me just start by taking the safer bet, and that is asking you to introduce yourself, both in terms of role and responsibilities, location, and any other personal information that you'd be prepared to share.
Thank you very much. So my name is Kirsten Dunlop. I am the Chief Executive Officer of EIT Climate-KIC, which is a public-private partnership, an organization in Europe whose responsibility, whose mission and purpose is to address climate change through innovation, with a focus both on mitigation, decarbonization, and on adaptation and resilience. I am personally located in the Netherlands, and since March have been in lockdown in my home in Haarlem. But normally traveling all over Europe, since most of our footprint is European-wide, so we are present in all European countries. And we do also support work in sub-Saharan Africa, in South America. We have a partnership on the west coast of the US, in Israel. We are working on a number of partnerships that stretch into China, and we have a partnership with Climate-KIC Australia based in Sydney. So working in a very international environment. And our work is very much about, we have chosen to focus in the last several years on the role that innovation can play in catalyzing systemic change, systems transformation. We have been in existence for 10 years, and our reflection on our own work and progress over those 10 years was to consider the need for a different way of designing, developing and deploying innovation so that it can catalyze the kind of accelerated learning we need to understand how our very complex social systems, economic systems, as well as technological systems need to change, and how on earth to change them in time. And my background is varied. I started life as an academic, focusing on Italian medieval and Renaissance cities and the building of the relationship between rhetoric, architecture and public identity. Moved into consulting and financial services, and have been working on innovation, strategic innovation and strategic risk in large-scale financial service industries for many, many, many years. And then stepped across into Climate-KIC about 4 years ago to take some of that learning into the challenging question of climate emergency.
Kirsten, this is powerful work. As you say, it's transformational work. It's the future now that you're focused on. But let me just take you back. At a personal level, when would you say you began the imagining of a future that could be of the order that you now anticipate? What are your early memories of thinking about the future?
So my personal early memories, I grew up as a child of an expatriate working for Shell, which of course has multiple ironies with the work that I'm doing now.
Yes.
And that meant I grew up between worlds. So my life was always lived between continents, between worlds, between time zones. And it meant that I was constantly looking for connections. And I realized quite early on in my university experience that looking for connections is not necessarily compatible with institutional forms. So much of my work has been to try and look for the things between the things in liminal zones. And that of course does mean that you start to look in the liminal zone between the present and the extended present and a set of possibilities out there. But where this really came to a head was in the work that I was doing within insurance in Generali, working in Assicurazioni Generali in Italy, where we started a program of working on the possibility that the future might be dramatically structurally different from the present, and how extraordinarily difficult that is to imagine, especially if you're sitting in the heart of a highly successful listed organization operating across every continent. So we started a program of literally building futures, not as we chose not to go down the route of extended scenario work, although much of my context was embedded within that, but to think about the futures, about a way of building futures almost as a prop, to kind of change a headspace. And I remember the very first 4 that we built with senior executives from across Generali at the time was 2004. If I look back at them now, one was on climate, one was on an aging population, one was on digitalization, and one was on shifts in underlying economic value systems towards resilience rather than growth. If I look back on them now, it's haunting. I look at them and I pretty much see what we're living through. And I remember at the time, one of the people we were working with, we were using kind of mechanisms of just getting people to go out and explore stuff at the very edges, people saying things, writing about things, posting stuff on the net. And I remember this really, really senior guy who was running our pensions in Generali, running our pensions system, and had been in the organization for 35 years. And we went through this process and we imagined all of these crazy things and teased it all out. And you just look at it and said, you know, once you've seen this stuff, you can't unsee it, can you? And it's always stuck with me, that sense of this is very much about almost pulling back some of the edges of our imagination. And once you do that, you make it a reality.
So therefore you bring the orientation, the methodologies, the anticipation, you bring the decision making, you bring into every moment of your daily professional work.
Definitely. It's absolutely instrumental.
And in that sense, therefore, you do see the discipline of this work as being crucial to your success. The futures discipline is absolutely crucial to the way in which you are going about the work.
Yes. So from our perspective, innovation, there are kind of 2 or 3 things that matter enormously. One is that innovation is a transitive verb. It's not create a new thing just for the sake of it. It's about making a change in yourself, whether that self is a business self or a business identity or a community or a city or a global value chain. And innovation as an activity is an activity of discovery and learning of possibility, and of the translation of that learning about possibility of possible different states into decision-making and action. And embedded in the heart of that is not just the question of inventing something that is new, but most importantly, speaking from the years of working within corporates, particularly successful corporates, it's the act of imagining letting go what is here now. And that to let go what is here now, you need something more powerful than a sense of the certainties that that you can rely upon, that you have been able to rely upon. And my experience of doing this work is to be able to make that leap, to be able to kind of prepare your mind for letting go. You need something that is emotionally exciting, psychologically exciting, intriguing, too intriguing to completely refute. And that requires acts of imagination. It requires acts of possibility. It requires, most of all, building a capability to imagine and consider possibility. So, I spent years working in insurance, working with organizations whose entire businesses depend upon the fact that people are going to have accidents that will need repair or will experience things that need repair. And a lot of the work we were exploring was, what if they just didn't feel the need to repair? Or what if some of those things could be prevented to the point that you didn't need somebody to fix it? You would be more likely to need somebody who'd pay for the multiple possibilities of prevention. Yes. And really just trying to get people's heads around, this is not about whether it's plausible, it's about whether it's possible. Because if you can think it, it's possible. And once you start to put that in your field of vision and you put that within decision making, it just massively expands options. And you need options to achieve change.
Well, Kirsten, let me ask you this. You work globally. You have a very productive relationship with Unesco. But I want to ask you this then, because you began with system transformation. And now I hear you say It is about innovation. It is about imagining. It is about possibilities. What is the system transformation that you are at this moment imagining will be real?
So I was with you to the last 3 words, will be real. Let's open a whole box on that. But let me just answer the first before you got to will be real.
We'll become the new paradigm. We'll become the transformation.
Let's just say there are two, as far as I'm concerned, that matter enormously. And then I think ultimately our well-being and our survival depends on whether we can actually imagine them into being and make them possible.
Right.
One is a fundamental shift in our understanding of our own identity as a species in relationship to the environment. If you think Genesis chapter 1, we need to get past Genesis chapter 1. We need to get past the idea that we have dominion over others and that that's okay, that is a working, viable model for going forward as a species. That system shift, and I think back to the work that I did in an organization in Suncorp where we built a future. Again, these are props, they're not massive scenarios, but we built a future called Sentient, and it was about a world in which we were able to start to tap into the sentient experiences of the physical environment and of other species, and just how much that would shock us into thinking differently about our relationships in all senses. And I'm sort of watching that and thinking, there's one that I would really like to accelerate. I think the other one is with respect to time. And our understanding of our relationship with time. In particular, as you know, we are running quite a significant program that we call long-termism.
Yes.
So much of our economic thinking, our intergenerational thinking, essentially bankrupts the future for the sake of the present. And I think there is a significant system, cultural, economic, technological, and institutional shift that needs to enlarge our understanding of time and change our underpinning paradigms for what time we take into account as we make decisions. Because if we could stop ourselves running discounted cash flows and discounting the present in favour of the future, and if we could start to transact around 30-year timescales and the consequences of choices now, if you're running a city and laying down planning laws on concrete and parking spaces, we might give ourselves half a chance.
Kirsten, Dunlop, thank you.